Welcome to Tech with Kaushik. This is part 4 of our complete practice question series for the AZ-104 Microsoft Azure Administrator exam. Test your knowledge with exam-focused questions covering key Azure administration concepts. Choose your answer before the timer ends, then review the correct answer, clear explanation, and practical exam tip. Let us begin part 4. The next item is question number 129. This question focuses on storage access keys. You manage an Azure storage account named Log Archive. Your organization requires administrators to rotate both storage account access keys at least every 90 days. You need the storage account to display a reminder when the keys have not been rotated within the required interval. What should you configure first? The options are: Choice A, a key expiration policy for Log Archive. Choice B, a blob lifecycle management rule. Choice C, a shared access signature expiration policy. Choice D, a resource lock on Log Archive. The correct answer is option A, a key expiration policy for Log Archive. Here is the technical justification. A storage account key expiration policy defines the interval after which Azure indicates that an account key should be rotated. Setting the period to 90 days provides the required reminder without performing the rotation automatically. B. Blob lifecycle management changes blob tiers or deletes blobs based on rules. C. A SAS expiration policy governs SAS validity intervals, not storage account keys. D. A resource lock restricts management operations and does not track key age. A storage account key expiration policy is a rotation reminder. Administrators must still rotate each access key safely. Question number 130. Requires careful analysis. Pay close attention to every stated constraint. Your organization uses a Microsoft Entra tenant and wants to deploy self-service password reset, SSPR. You plan to phase the rollout by initially enabling SSPR for only a subset of users. You have the following identities in the tenant: User A, a standard user account, SEC Group 1, a Microsoft Entra Security Group, M365 Group 1, a Microsoft 365 Group. You navigate to the password reset blade in the Azure portal and choose the selected option. Which of the identities can you directly select in the portal to enable SSPR for this phased rollout? Evaluate each option against the stated requirement. Next, option A, SEC Group 1 only. Next, option B, User A only. Next, option C, SEC Group 1 and M365 Group 1 only. Next, option D, User A, SEC Group 1, and M365 Group 1. The best answer is option A, SEC Group 1 only. When configuring self-service password reset, SSPR, for a subset of users in the Microsoft Entra Admin Center, choosing the selected option, you can only target a security group. You cannot directly select individual users or Microsoft 365 groups for the SSPR scope selection. The incorrect choices fail for the following reasons. B. You cannot assign SSPR directly to an individual user in the portal configuration. C. Microsoft 365 groups are not supported for scoping SSPR. D. Only security groups are supported. Remember this distinction for the exam. The selected option for Microsoft Entra Self-Service Password Reset only accepts a single security group. If you need to enable it for multiple departments, you must nest groups within that single designated SSPR security group. Now consider question number 131. The focus now shifts to Azure RBAC. Consider this scenario. You manage an Azure storage account named Data Repo 1. The storage account contains highly sensitive blob data. You need to grant a data analyst named David access to read, write, and delete blob data within Data Repo 1. However, your security team requires that David's access only applies to blobs that have a specific index tag, project equals alpha. You plan to use Azure Attribute-Based Access Control, ABAC, to add a condition to David's role assignment. Which two Azure RBAC roles support adding conditions and provide the required access to manage the blobs? Select 2. Choose every option that satisfies the requirement. Option A, Storage Blob Data Contributor. Option B, Storage Blob Data Owner. Option C, Storage Account Contributor. Option D, Storage Blob Delegator. Option E, Contributor. The required selections are Option A, Storage Blob Data Contributor, and Option B, Storage Blob Data Owner. The key reason is Azure Attribute-Based Access Control, ABAC, allows you to add conditions to role assignments. For Azure Storage, conditions are explicitly supported for data plane blob roles, including Storage Blob Data Contributor, Storage Blob Data Owner, and Storage Blob Data Reader. Both Contributor and Owner at the blob data level grant the required read/write/delete permissions. The other choices do not satisfy the requirement because C, Storage Account Contributor, is a control plane role used to manage the storage account resource itself, like networking or keys, not the data inside the blobs. It does not support blob-level ABAC conditions. D, Storage Blob Delegator is used to get a user delegation key to create SAS tokens, not to directly manipulate blob data based on tags. E, Contributor is a general control plane role and does not grant data plane access to blobs or support blob index tag conditions. A useful examination rule is this. ABAC role assignment conditions in Azure Storage apply only to data plane roles, Storage Blob Data Reader, Contributor, and Owner. Let us examine question number 134. Let us first review the situation. You have an Azure subscription containing the following storage accounts in a region that supports zone-redundant storage conversions: Storage A, General Purpose V2, Storage V2, Locally Redundant Storage, LRS, Cool Access Tier Storage B, General Purpose V2, Storage V2, Read Access Geo-Redundant Storage, RAGRS, Hot Access Tier Storage C, Blob Storage Account Kind, Locally Redundant Storage, LRS, Hot Access Tier. None of the accounts contains archived blobs or uses an unsupported NFS. Configuration. Your organization requires eligible accounts to use zone-redundant storage, ZRS. You need to identify which accounts can be converted to ZRS without manually copying their data to a new storage account. Which storage accounts support direct conversion to ZRS? Select 2. Identify all valid responses. Review each available choice. Option A is Storage A. Option B is Storage B. Option C is Storage C. Select Option A, Storage A, and Option B, Storage B. The requirement is satisfied because in a supported region, eligible standard general purpose V2 accounts can be converted to ZRS. Storage A and Storage B are Storage V2 accounts and meet the stated prerequisites. The alternatives can be eliminated because C, a legacy blob storage account, is not eligible for direct ZRS conversion. Migrate or copy the data to a supported Storage V2 account. The key takeaway is ZRS conversion eligibility depends on account kind, region, current redundancy, and unsupported features such as certain NFS configurations or archived blobs. Proceed to question number 135. Review the situation. Your organization uses an Azure container registry named ACR Prod, which was created using the standard SKU. Your development team is expanding globally, and you need to ensure that container images are automatically replicated to 3 different Azure regions to reduce image pull latency. What is the first step you must take on ACR Prod to enable georeplication? Review the options. Choice A, upgrade the SKU to Premium. Choice B, create an Azure private endpoint. Choice C, add a cache rule to the registry. Choice D, enable the admin user property. The required response is Option A, upgrade the SKU to Premium. The reasoning is as follows. Georeplication is a feature that automatically manages registry topology across multiple regions. It is exclusively available in the Premium SKU of Azure Container Registry. Therefore, you must first upgrade ACR Prod from Standard to Premium before you can configure replication. Now consider why the remaining options are unsuitable. B. A private endpoint is a networking feature to secure access. It has nothing to do with image replication. C. A cache rule allows you to cache images from public registries, like Docker Hub, not replicate your own images globally. D. Enabling the admin user allows basic authentication, it does not unlock georeplication. Keep this examination point in mind. The premium SKU for Azure Container Registry is required for three major enterprise features: georeplication, private link, private endpoints, and customer managed keys, CMK. The appropriate choice is option B3. This is correct because Azure Blob Storage allows a maximum of 5 stored access policies per container. Since the reports container already has 2 stored access policies configured, you can create a maximum of 3 additional policies, 5 total. The remaining options are incorrect because A. The limit is 5, not 3, 2 plus 1. C. 5 is the total limit, but since 2 already exist, you can only add 3 more. D. You are allowed to add more policies as you have not hit the limit of 5. Exam tip. A single Azure storage container, file share, queue, or table can have a maximum of 5 stored access policies at any given time. We will now analyze question number 138. Consider the following scenario. You manage an Azure environment containing an Azure Backup Vault named Vault Backup and a Recovery Services Vault named Vault Recovery. You need to configure backups for the following resources: VM data, an Azure Virtual Machine Disk OS, an Azure Managed Disk File Share 1, and Azure File Share. Match the resource to the correct vault type required to back it up. Review the items in the left column. Left item 1. VM data. Left item 2. Disk OS. Left item 3. File Share 1. Choose matches from the following right side entries. Right option A, Vault Backup. Right option B, Vault Recovery. Here are the completed matches. Pair VM data and B, Vault Recovery. Pair Disk OS and A, Vault Backup. Pair File Share 1 and B, Vault Recovery. Here is the technical justification. Azure provides 2 types of vaults. The older and more common Recovery Services Vault supports protecting Azure Virtual Machines, SQL and Virtual Machines, SAP HANA, and Azure File Shares. The newer Azure Backup Vault is used for backing up Azure Managed Disks, Azure Database for PostgreSQL, and Azure Blobs. Memorize the split. Recovery Services Vaults protect IaaS workloads like virtual machines, Azure Files, and SQL inside virtual machines. Backup vaults protect PaaS/data resources like managed disks, Azure PostgreSQL, and Azure Blob Storage. Question number 139. This question moves us into container instances limit. Scenario. You manage an Azure Container Instances (ACI) deployment. You deploy a container group named AppGroup1 that contains 2 containers. When defining the containers, you allocate 2 CPUs to container A and 3 CPUs to container B. This means the total CPU allocation for AppGroup1 is 5 CPUs. Under heavy load, you notice that container B occasionally consumes 4 CPUs, which starves container A, leaving it with only 1 CPU to operate. You need to ensure that container A always has access to its full 2 CPUs, while preventing container B from starving it. What should you configure? The options are: Choice A, set the CPU limit of container B to 3. Choice B, increase the CPU request of container A to 3. Choice C, deploy the containers into separate virtual networks. Choice D, set the total container group CPU limit to 7. In this case, select option A, set the CPU limit of container B to 3. In Azure Container Instances, the resources available to the container group are the sum of the resource requests of its instances, 5 CPUs total. If containers are allowed to burst beyond their requests without limits, one container can starve another. By setting a hard CPU limit of 3 on container B, you ensure it can never exceed 3 CPUs, which guarantees that container A will always have the remaining 2 CPUs available to it. B. Increasing the request of A increases the total group size, but if B has a high limit, B could still potentially burst and impact A depending on scheduling. Setting a strict limit is the correct mechanism. C. Deploying to separate VNet splits them out of the container group, breaking the shared localhost networking and storage context of the group. D. You cannot set a group-level limit directly. Group size is defined by the sum of requests, and boundaries are enforced by individual container limits. Remember this distinction for the exam. When multiple containers run in an ACI container group, apply CPU and memory limits to the individual containers to prevent a noisy neighbor container from starving the others in the same group. Review question number 140. Carefully. Begin by examining the scenario. You are designing the architecture for a new containerized microservice in Azure. The application experiences highly variable traffic. You require a hosting service that supports built-in automatic scaling based on HTTP traffic and event-driven metrics, including the ability to automatically scale down to 0 when there is no activity. Which Azure service meets these requirements? Compare the following options. Choice A, Azure Container Apps. Choice B, Azure Container Instances. Choice C, Azure App Service. Choice D, Azure Kubernetes Service, AKS. The required response is option A, Azure Container Apps. The key reason is Azure Container Apps is built on Kubernetes and CADA, Kubernetes event-driven autoscaling. It natively supports automatic scaling based on HTTP traffic or event triggers, like queue length, and uniquely supports scaling all the way down to 0 instances to save costs when idle. The incorrect choices fail for the following reasons. B. Azure Container Instances, ACI, does not have built-in auto-scaling capabilities. You must scale it manually or build complex custom automation using logic apps / functions. C. Azure App Service supports auto-scaling, scale-out rules, but it does not support scaling down to 0 instances. D. While AKS supports CADA, it requires managing the Kubernetes cluster infrastructure and node pools, which cannot entirely scale down to 0, the system node pool must remain. Container Apps provides this natively as a serverless pass. A useful examination rule is this. If an Azure container requirement demands scaling based on events, CADA, or scaling down to 0, Azure Container Apps is the correct service. The next item is question number 141. Next, we enter the topic of external user management. Review the situation. Your organization uses a Microsoft Entra tenant named maincorp.com. You collaborate heavily with a vendor company that uses the domain vendorcorp.com. You want to allow your internal users to invite guest users to the tenant, but you must ensure that invitations can only be sent to email addresses ending in @vendorcorp.com. Invitations to any other domains, like Gmail or other corporate domains, must be blocked. Where in the Microsoft Entra Admin Center should you configure this restriction? Review the options. Option A, External collaboration settings leads to collaboration restrictions. Option B, Cross-tenant access settings leads to tenant restrictions. Option C, Cross-tenant access settings leads to B2B Direct Connect. Option D, Custom security attributes. The correct answer is option A, External collaboration settings leads to collaboration restrictions. The requirement is satisfied because in Microsoft Entra ID, the external collaboration settings blade allows you to control who can invite guests and to which domains guests can be invited. Under collaboration restrictions, you can select allow invitations only to the specified domains and input vendorcorp.com. The other choices do not satisfy the requirement because B, Cross-tenant access settings leads to tenant restrictions, controls what external tenants your users can access when on your corporate network, not who can be invited as a guest into your tenant. C. B2B Direct Connect is used for teams' shared channels and mutual trust without creating guest objects, rather than restricting guest invitations. D. Custom security attributes are used for ABAC data classification, not for restricting B2B invitations. The key takeaway is to create an allow list or deny list of domains for B2B guest invitations. Use external collaboration settings. To control inbound/outbound trust and MFA sharing, use cross-tenant access settings. The next key item is question number 142. Focus on the following situation. You manage an Azure storage account named Public Assets that contains a blob container holding marketing videos. Your marketing team generates shared access signature, SAS, tokens to share videos with external agencies. Security policy recommends that no SAS token remain valid for more than 7 days. You need users who create a SAS token with a longer validity interval to receive a warning. The policy must not block creation of the SAS token. What should you configure on Public Assets? Focus on the distinction between these options. Now examine choice A. A SAS expiration policy with the action set to log. Now examine choice B. A lifecycle management rule. Now examine choice C. An Azure policy assignment with a deny effect. Now examine choice D. A resource lock. The best answer is option A. A SAS expiration policy with the action set to log. The reasoning is as follows. A SAS expiration policy defines a recommended maximum validity interval. With the action set to log, non-compliant SAS use is logged and users receive a warning rather than creation being blocked. The alternatives can be eliminated because B. Lifecycle management controls blob tiering and deletion. C. A deny policy would block the operation, contrary to the requirement. D. A resource lock protects management plane changes and does not govern SAS validity. Keep this examination point in mind. Use the log action to warn and audit SAS intervals. Use block only when supported and enforcement is required. Let us work through question number 143. The focus now shifts to container registry SKUs. Review the scenario carefully. You manage an Azure subscription and are planning to deploy multiple Azure container registries. You need to determine which features are supported by the various registry SKUs, Basic, Standard, and Premium. You intend to use 2 specific features, ACR tasks, to automatically build and patch container images on demand. Private endpoints, to secure network access to the registry using Azure Private Link. For each statement, select yes if the statement is true. Otherwise, select no. The first statement is, ACR tasks are supported on the Basic, Standard, and Premium SKUs. The second statement is, private endpoints are supported on both the Standard and Premium SKUs. The third statement is, georeplication is supported only on the Premium SKU. Statement 1. The answer is yes. ACR tasks are available on all pricing tiers. Statement 2. The answer is no. Private endpoints are only available on the Premium SKU. Statement 3. The answer is yes. Georeplication is an exclusive feature of the Premium tier. Exam tip. The Premium SKU of Azure Container Registry is required for 3 key enterprise capabilities: private endpoints, private link, georeplication, and customer managed keys, CMK. ACR tasks are available on all tiers. We will now analyze question number 144. Let us first review the situation. You deploy a supported Azure virtual machine named VMApp. Security policy requires encryption of the operating system disk, data disks, temporary disk, and disk caches. You must avoid installing an encryption extension inside the guest operating system. Which encryption option should you enable? Choose from the following options. Choice A, encryption at host. Choice B, Azure Disk Encryption. Choice C, server-side encryption with platform-managed keys only. Choice D, BitLocker configured manually inside the guest operating system. The appropriate choice is option A, encryption at host. This is correct because encryption at host encrypts data on the VM host, including temporary disks and disk caches, in addition to data written to manage disks. It does not require an encryption extension inside the guest OS. Now consider why the remaining options are unsuitable. B. Azure Disk Encryption uses a guest extension and does not match the requirement. C. Managed Disk Server-Side Encryption does not cover temporary disks or host caches. D. Manual BitLocker configuration is performed inside the guest and does not provide the requested host-level coverage. Encryption at host covers managed disks, temporary disks, and disk caches without deploying Azure Disk Encryption in the guest. Let us examine question number 145. Begin by examining the scenario. You are cleaning up a Microsoft Entra tenant. The tenant contains the following objects: User A, member of Group IT, assigned a Microsoft Entra IDP2 license directly. User B, member of Group Sales, no licenses assigned. Group IT, Security Group, no licenses assigned. Group Sales, Microsoft 365 Group, assigned a Microsoft Entra IDP2 license, and has members. For each statement, select yes if the statement is true. Otherwise, select no. Statement 1. You can delete User A. Statement 2. You can delete Group IT. Statement 3. You can delete Group Sales without first removing its members or assigned licenses. The answer to Statement 1 is yes. A direct license and group membership do not prevent deletion of a cloud-only user. The answer to Statement 2 is yes. A cloud-only security group can be deleted. The answer to Statement 3 is yes. The group can be deleted, its license assignments are reclaimed and its member user objects remain. Remember this distinction for the exam. Deleting a group removes the group and its assignments, not the member user objects. Proceed to question number 146. You manage an Azure App Service web app named Web App Secure running on a premium app service plan. You intend to secure a custom domain on Web App Secure by importing a TLS/SSL certificate directly from an Azure Key Vault named VaultCerts. VaultCerts currently stores 4 certificates with the following properties: Cert 1, Content Type PKCS number 12, PFX, Key Type RSA Cert 2, Content Type PEM, Key Type RSA Cert 3, Content Type PKCS number 12, PFX, Key Type EC Cert 4, Content Type PEM, Key Type EC. Which certificates can you successfully import into Web App Secure for the custom domain TLS binding? Available choices. Choice A, Cert 1 only. Choice B, Cert 1 and Cert 3 only. Choice C, Cert 1 and Cert 2 only. Choice D, Cert 2 and Cert 4 only. In this case, select option A, Cert 1 only. Here is the technical justification. For direct app service import from Key Vault, the certificate must be available as a PKCS number 12, PFX, secret and use an RSA key. Cert 1 is the only certificate that meets both requirements. The remaining options are incorrect because B, Cert 3 uses an EC key, which is not supported by the Key Vault import path. C, Cert 2 is PEM rather than PFX. D, Cert 2 and Cert 4 are PEM, and Cert 4 also uses an EC key. A useful examination rule is this. App Service can use uploaded PFX certificates, but Key Vault import has stricter format and key type requirements. Evaluate question number 147. Against every requirement. Identify the decisive requirement in this scenario. You manage an Azure Container Registry named Registry Corp that contains a Linux container image named API App Latest. You attempt to deploy an Azure container instance by selecting the image directly from the registry in the Azure portal. The deployment fails because registry credentials cannot be retrieved. You need to complete the direct portal deployment without creating a service principal. Solution: you create a user-assigned managed identity, assign it the ACR pull role on Registry Corp, and then retry the direct portal deployment. Does this meet the goal? Compare every choice before deciding. Consider option A. Yes. Consider option B. No. The best answer is option B, no. A user-assigned managed identity can pull an ACR image when the ACI deployment is configured for that identity through ARM, Bicep, or supported CLI commands. Merely assigning ACR pull and retrying the direct Azure portal image deployment does not supply the registry credentials required by that portal workflow. A. The portal direct deployment workflow does not automatically use the newly created managed identity. Enabling the ACR admin user would satisfy this specific portal-based goal, although managed identity is preferred for template or CLI deployments. The key takeaway is for ACI image pulls with managed identity, use a user-assigned identity and configure it in the deployment. The portal direct image workflow commonly uses ACR admin credentials. Now consider question number 148. This is a medium-level challenge. Consider this scenario. Your organization uses an Azure subscription with 2 storage accounts, Storage Alpha, Data Lake Storage Generation 2, hierarchical namespace enabled. Contains a blob container named Container A and a file share named Share A. Storage Beta, General Purpose V2, hierarchical namespace disabled. Contains a blob container named Container B and a file share named Share B. You are instructed to organize the files within these storage services using true hierarchical directories. Which containers and file shares support true directory structures? Select exactly 3 answers. Option A, Container A. Option B, Container B. Option C, Share A. Option D, Share B. The correct answers are Option A, Container A, Option C, Share A, and Option D, Share B. The key reason is Container A uses the hierarchical namespace provided by Azure Data Lake Storage Generation 2. Azure file shares support hierarchical directories independently of the blob storage hierarchical namespace setting, so both Share A and Share B support directories. The incorrect choices fail for the following reasons. B. Container B uses the flat blob storage namespace. Folder-like paths are virtual directories represented by delimiters and blob names, not independently managed directory objects. Keep this examination point in mind. The hierarchical namespace setting applies to blob storage. Azure file shares support directories regardless of that blob setting. Next, question number 149. You manage an Azure environment linked to a Microsoft Entra tenant that has sufficient Microsoft Entra IDP1 licenses. You need to import 500 new employee accounts. The imported user accounts must automatically join a specific security group based on their assigned department. Which 2 configurations are required to achieve this with the least administrative effort? Select 2 answers that satisfy the requirement. Choices. Option A, create a CSV file formatted with the user details and department attributes. Option B, deploy an Azure Resource Manager, ARM, template defining the user accounts. Option C, configure the security group to use the dynamic user membership type. Option D, configure the security group to use the assigned membership type. E, write a PowerShell runbook to parse an XML file. The choices that satisfy the requirement are Option A, create a CSV file formatted with the user details and department attributes, and Option C, configure the security group to use the dynamic user membership type. The requirement is satisfied because Microsoft Entra bulk user creation uses a CSV template, and the department value can be populated during import. A dynamic user group evaluates a membership rule against that attribute and automatically maintains membership. Microsoft Entra IDP1 licensing supports dynamic membership. The other choices do not satisfy the requirement because B, while ARM templates can deploy resources, managing user imports through bulk CSV is the native Microsoft Entra administrative method. D, assigned membership requires manual intervention to add users to the group, which does not minimize effort. E, the bulk import tool in Microsoft Entra requires CSV format, not XML. Exam tip. Use dynamic user groups in Microsoft Entra ID to automate group membership based on user attributes like department or location. The next item is question number 150. The difficulty level here is medium. You have an Azure subscription containing a storage account named Storage Data 99. The storage account contains a blob container named Blob Archive, an Azure file share named Files Department. You are configuring Azure Backup using a Recovery Services Vault and a Backup Vault. You need to implement backups for both the container and the file share to meet organizational recovery point objectives. Select the minimum allowable schedule frequency for each resource type using standard Azure backup capabilities. Choose the correct entry for every drop-down field. Statement 1. The backup frequency for blob archive using operational backup can be the blank. Choose between continuous, every 4 hours, or daily. Statement 2. The backup frequency for files department using vaulted backup can be the blank. Choose between continuous, every 4 hours, or daily. For Statement 1, select continuous. Operational backup is continuous and does not use a scheduled frequency. For Statement 2, select every 4 hours. Azure Files backup policies can schedule up to 6 backups per day. Blob operational backup is continuous. Azure Files vaulted backup can use an intraday schedule as frequent as every 4 hours. Now consider question number 151. Review the situation. You are configuring a supported Azure virtual machine with encryption at host enabled. The operating system and data disks already use server-side encryption. Which 2 additional data locations are protected by encryption at host? Choose the best 2 responses. The options are: Choice A, the temporary disk. Choice B, the operating system and data disk caches. Choice C, traffic sent across the virtual network. Choice D, backup data stored in a recovery services vault. The required selections are option A, the temporary disk, and option B, the operating system and data disk caches. The reasoning is as follows. Encryption at host extends encryption to data written to the VM host, including the temporary disk and the caches for operating system and data disks. This complements server-side encryption of managed disks. The alternatives can be eliminated because C, encryption at host protects data at rest on the compute host. It does not encrypt network traffic. D, backup data protection is controlled by Azure Backup and Vault encryption settings, not the VM encryption at host setting. Remember this distinction for the exam. Encryption at host protects temporary disks and disk caches in addition to the managed disks protected by server-side encryption. Question number 152. Now, treat this as a medium question. Scenario. An on-premises data center connects to VNet Hub through a site-to-site VPN gateway. VNet Hub is paired with VNet Spoke, which contains an application virtual machine. The VNet address spaces do not overlap. Which pairing configuration allows on-premises users to reach the virtual machine through the existing VPN gateway? Options. Option A, enable use remote gateways on VNet Hub and allow gateway transit on VNet Spoke. Option B, enable allow gateway transit on VNet Hub and use remote gateways on VNet Spoke. Option C, deploy an Azure application gateway in VNet Spoke. Option D, create a second VPN gateway in VNet Spoke. The required response is option B, enable allow gateway transit on VNet Hub and use remote gateways on VNet Spoke. This is correct because the hub owns the VPN gateway, so its peering must allow gateway transit. The Spoke peering must use the remote gateway. This lets the Spoke use the hub gateway for routes to and from the on-premises network. Now consider why the remaining options are unsuitable. A, the settings are reversed, the VNet that owns the gateway allows transit. C, application gateway is a layer 7 web traffic load balancer and does not provide gateway transit. D, a paired Spoke can use the hub gateway and does not need a second gateway. A useful examination rule is this. On the gateway VNet, enable allow gateway transit. On the paired Spoke, enable use remote gateways. Question number 153. Scenario. You manage an Azure container registry named Registry 11. Your security team requires administrators to cryptographically sign container images and verify their signatures before deployment. You must use the current Microsoft recommended signing approach. Which solution should you implement? Available choices. Option A. Notation with a signing certificate stored in Azure Key Vault. Option B. Customer-managed keys for registry encryption. Option C. Dedicated data endpoints. Option D. A connected registry. The correct answer is option A. Notation with a signing certificate stored in Azure Key Vault. Here is the technical justification. Microsoft recommends the Notary project implementation through the notation CLI for signing and verifying OCI artifacts in Azure Container Registry. Azure Key Vault can securely store the certificate and signing key. The remaining options are incorrect because B. Customer-managed keys encrypt registry data at rest but do not sign images. C. Dedicated data endpoints control network routing and firewall configuration, not artifact signatures. D. Connected registries synchronize content to remote environments, they do not provide image signing. The key takeaway is use notation for current AC or artifact signing and verification. Encryption settings do not establish image provenance. Proceed to question number 154. Consider this scenario. An Azure virtual machine named Server Web 1 was provisioned using an ARM template. You are notified by Azure Resource Health that the physical host running Server Web 1 is experiencing hardware degradation. You must move the virtual machine to a different hardware node immediately. You attempt to resolve the issue by moving Server Web 1 to a different resource group within the same subscription. Does this meet the goal? Review the options. Option A. Yes. Option B. No. The appropriate choice is option B. No. Moving a virtual machine to a different resource group or subscription merely reorganizes its logical administrative boundaries in Azure Resource Manager. It does not initiate a migration of the VM to a different underlying physical hardware node. A. The action does not fulfill the technical requirement of moving the VM off degraded hardware. Keep this examination point in mind. To move a virtual machine to a new physical host node immediately to resolve hardware issues, use the redeploy action from the portal. Proceed to question number 155. Next, we enter the topic of app service scaling. Consider this scenario. You manage an Azure App Service plan named Web App Plan Standard. The web app running on this plan is experiencing intermittent high traffic. You need to configure the plan to automatically provision additional compute instances whenever the average CPU utilization exceeds 75% over a 10-minute period. Which scaling configuration should you apply? Choice A. Rules based in the scale-out, App Service Plan, Settings. Choice B. Standard S2 in the scale-up, App Service Plan, Settings. Choice C. Automatic in the scale-out, App Service Plan, Settings. Choice D. Manual in the scale-out, App Service Plan, Settings. In this case, select option A. Rules based in the scale-out, App Service Plan, Settings. The key reason is scaling out involves adding more compute instances to distribute the load. The rules-based option allows you to configure specific metrics, such as a CPU threshold of 75%, to trigger auto-scaling out or in. The incorrect choices fail for the following reasons. B. Scaling up changes the size of the compute instances, for example, from standard to premium, but does not configure automatic horizontal scaling based on metrics. C. Automatic scaling is traffic-based and does not let you define the requested Azure Monitor CPU threshold rule. D. Manual scaling requires an administrator to change the instance count manually and does not respond to CPU usage automatically. Exam tip. Scale-out adds instances, scale-up adds power. Use rules-based scale-out to configure metric-driven triggers like CPU or memory thresholds. Now consider question number 156. Your organization has an Azure Virtual Network named NetCore configured with force tunneling to route all internet-bound traffic through an on-premises VPN gateway. NetCore contains a virtual machine named AppVM1. AppVM1 needs to upload diagnostic logs to a standard performance Azure storage account named LogStorage88. How can you ensure that traffic between AppVM1 and LogStorage88 remains on the Microsoft Backbone network and bypasses the force tunneling? The options are: Option A, configure an Azure Virtual WAN. Option B, create a private endpoint for the storage account and configure private DNS resolution. Option C, deploy an Azure application proxy. Option D, attach a network security group, NSG, to the VM subnet. The correct answer is option B, create a private endpoint for the storage account and configure private DNS resolution. The requirement is satisfied because a private endpoint gives the storage service a private IP address in the virtual network. Correct private DNS resolution makes AppVM1 use that address, so the more specific private route remains in Azure instead of following the forced tunnel default route to on-premises. The other choices do not satisfy the requirement because A, Virtual WAN is a networking hub architecture and does not inherently solve the forced tunneling issue for storage traffic. C, application proxy is used for publishing on-premises web apps externally, not for internal routing to storage. D, an NSG controls traffic filtering, not routing paths. To bypass forced tunneling to on-premises and keep traffic on the Azure backbone, use service endpoints or private endpoints for pass resources. The next item is question number 157. We are moving to container registry. Scenario: you have a premium SKU Azure container registry named ACR Global that stores a container image named Backend App v1. When deploying a new Azure container instance using this image, the deployment fails with an image pull error. You attempt to resolve the issue by selecting Use Dedicated Data Endpoint in the registry settings. Does this resolve the image pull authorization error for the container instance? Review the options. Choice A: yes. Choice B: no. The best answer is option B, no. The reasoning is as follows. Dedicated data endpoints allow you to configure precise network firewall rules on the data operations of the registry, often to bypass routing limits, but they do not solve authorization or credential errors preventing the pull of an image. The alternatives can be eliminated because A, the solution does not address identity or credentials. Remember this distinction for the exam. If an Azure container instance fails to pull an image from ACR, verify the deployment includes the correct registry credentials, admin user, service principal, or managed identity. Question number 158. Review the situation. You have an Azure container registry named ACR Global that stores a container image named Backend App v1. When deploying a new Azure container instance using this image, the deployment fails with an image pull error. You attempt to resolve the issue by creating a private endpoint connection for ACR Global. Does this action alone provide the necessary credentials for the container instance to pull the image? Available choices. Choice A: yes. Choice B: no. The required response is option B, no. This is correct because creating a private endpoint secures the network path between the container instance, if VNet integrated, and the registry, but it does not provide the required authentication credentials, such as an admin user, service principal, or managed identity, necessary to authorize the pull request. Now consider why the remaining options are unsuitable. A. Network connectivity does not bypass identity authorization requirements for pulling container images. A useful examination rule is this. Pulling images from Azure Container Registry requires both network reachability and proper authentication credentials. Question number 159. This question moves us into VM resource moves. An Azure virtual machine named Server Web 1 was provisioned using an ARM template. You are notified by Azure Resource Health that the physical host running Server Web 1 is experiencing hardware degradation. You must move the virtual machine to a different hardware node immediately. You attempt to resolve the issue by navigating to the Redeploy plus Reapply blade for Server Web 1 and selecting Redeploy. Does this meet the goal? Option A: yes. Option B: no. The appropriate choice is option A. Yes. Here is the technical justification. The redeploy action gracefully shuts down the virtual machine, moves it to a new, healthy physical node within the Azure infrastructure, and powers it back on. This directly resolves issues related to degraded physical hosts. The remaining options are incorrect because B, redeploy is the exact and correct feature for this scenario. The key takeaway is use the redeploy feature to migrate a virtual machine to a different underlying Azure hardware node if you suspect platform-level hardware issues. Now consider question number 160. Consider this scenario. An Azure virtual machine named Server Web 1 was provisioned using an ARM template. You are notified by Azure Resource Health that the physical host running Server Web 1 is experiencing hardware degradation. You must move the virtual machine to a different hardware node immediately. You attempt to resolve the issue by navigating to the Updates blade and applying a one-time update. Does this meet the goal? Option A. Yes. Option B. No. In this case, select option B, no. The Updates blade is used to manage OS-level patches and updates. Applying a one-time OS update does not change the physical hardware node hosting the virtual machine. A. The action does not fulfill the technical requirement of moving the VM off degraded hardware. Keep this examination point in mind. To migrate a virtual machine to a new underlying hardware node in Azure, you must select Redeploy from the VM blade. Question number 161. An Azure virtual network named vNetProd connects to an on-premises data center via a policy-based virtual network gateway named Gateway Site. Developers need to connect their remote laptops directly to vNetProd using a point-to-site (P2S) VPN connection. Which two actions are required to configure the point-to-site VPN? You need to identify two correct options. The options are: Option A. Add a connection to Gateway Site. Option B. Delete the existing policy-based virtual network gateway Site. Option C. Add a service endpoint to vNetProd. Option D. Create a new route-based virtual network gateway. Option E. Add a public IP address space to the gateway subnet. The correct answers are option B. Delete the existing policy-based virtual network gateway Site, and option D. Create a new route-based virtual network gateway. The key reason is point-to-site P2S VPN connections require a route-based virtual network gateway. Because a gateway subnet can only host one virtual network gateway, you must delete the existing policy-based gateway and provision a route-based one in its place. The incorrect choices fail for the following reasons. A. Adding a connection to a policy-based gateway does not add P2S capabilities. C. Service endpoints restrict pass access, they do not configure VPNs. E. The gateway subnet already has a gateway, meaning public IP allocation for the subnet is already established. The issue is the gateway type. Exam tip. Point-to-site P2S VPNs in Azure require a route-based virtual network gateway. Policy-based gateways do not support P2S. Question number 162. Now. Next, we enter the topic of AZ copy. Scenario. You are signed into AZ copy by using Microsoft Entra ID. You need to upload the C:\logs directory and all of its subdirectories from a local Windows server to the logs archive container in the Storage 99 storage account. Which command should you execute? Option A. AZ storage blob copy start batch source container C:\logs destination container logs archive. Option B. ASCII sync https://diagstorage99.blob.core.windows.net/logs-archive C:\logs recursive. Option C. ASCII copy C:\logs https://diagstorage99.blob.core.windows.net/logs-archive recursive. Option D. ASCII remove https://diagstorage99.blob.core.windows.net/logs-archive recursive. The correct answer is option C, ASCII copy C:/logs https://diagstorage99.blob.core.windows.net/logs-archive recursive. The requirement is satisfied because ASCII copy uploads data from a local file system path to blob storage. The recursive option includes all files and subdirectories, and the existing Microsoft Entra sign-in supplies authorization. The other choices do not satisfy the requirement because A. AZ storage blob copy start batch performs service-side blob copy operations and does not use a local directory as a source container. B. The source and destination are reversed, which would synchronize from Azure to the local path. D. ASCII remove deletes destination data rather than uploading files. Use ASCII copy with recursive to upload a local directory tree to a blob container. Review question number 163. Carefully. Consider the following scenario. Your Azure subscription contains 15 virtual networks across multiple resource groups. Security compliance requires that any newly created network security group, NSG, must automatically contain a rule blocking TCP port 3389. You assign a custom Azure policy definition with the deploy if not exists effect at the subscription scope. The assignment has a managed identity and deploys the required NSG security rule child resource. Does this meet the goal? Now examine the possible answers. Option A is yes. Option B is no. The appropriate choice is option A. Yes. The reasoning is as follows. A deploy if not exists policy can evaluate each NSG and deploy the missing security rule child resource. Assigning it at subscription scope covers NSGs in all resource groups, and the assignment's managed identity performs the remediation deployment. The alternatives can be eliminated because B. Azure policy is the correct governance tool to prevent non-compliant resource configurations across an entire subscription. Remember this distinction for the exam. Use Azure policy to enforce organizational security standards, such as restricting specific open ports across all network security groups in a subscription. Proceed to question number 164. Review the situation. A junior administrator attempts to deploy a third-party firewall appliance from the Azure Marketplace using an ARM template and Azure PowerShell. The deployment fails with the following error: user failed validation to purchase resources. Error message: legal terms have not been accepted for this item on this subscription. How can you ensure the administrator can successfully deploy the resource via the ARM template? Available choices. Choice A: run the set AZ Marketplace terms complete from Azure PowerShell. Choice B: assign the billing administrator role to the user. Choice C: run the set AZ API management subscription complete. Choice D: register the Microsoft Marketplace resource provider in the subscription. The best answer is option A: run the set AZ Marketplace terms complete from Azure PowerShell. This is correct because before deploying programmatic ARM templates containing third-party Azure Marketplace images, the subscription owner must accept the legal terms. This can be done via the portal or by using the set AZ Marketplace terms, or set AZ VM image terms, complete. Now consider why the remaining options are unsuitable. B. The billing administrator role manages invoices and billing profiles, not marketplace legal agreements. C. API management is an entirely different service and has no relation to marketplace image validation. D. The Microsoft Marketplace resource provider does not automatically accept legal terms for third-party images. A useful examination rule is this. To deploy a third-party marketplace appliance via ARM template, you must first accept the legal terms using set AZ Marketplace terms or through the Azure portal. Let us work through question number 165. The focus now shifts to built-in Azure roles. Review the scenario carefully. You manage a resource group named RG Support. A user named Helpdesk User 1 must be able to create and remove Azure role assignments in RG Support but must not be able to manage the resources in the group. Which built-in Azure role should you assign to Helpdesk User 1 at the RG Support scope? Choose from the following options. Choice A: Contributor. Choice B: Owner. Choice C, User Access Administrator. Choice D, User Administrator. The required response is option C, User Access Administrator. Here is the technical justification. User Access Administrator can manage user access to Azure resources, including role assignments, without granting general resource management permissions. Assigning it at RG support limits the authority to that resource group and its descendants. The remaining options are incorrect because A, contributor can manage resources but cannot assign Azure roles. B, owner can manage resources and access, which exceeds the requirement. D, user administrator is a Microsoft Entra Directory role, not an Azure RBAC role for resource access. The key takeaway is use User Access Administrator to manage Azure RBAC assignments without granting full resource management permissions. Let us work through question number 166. Consider the following scenario. Your organization has a Microsoft Entra ID tenant named fabricam.onmicrosoft.com containing 500 users. You recently procured 25 Microsoft Entra ID Premium P2 licenses. You must enable the premium features for the security team, which consists of 25 members. How do you assign these features to the users? Review each available choice. Option A is modify the directory role from the assigned roles blade of each user. Option B is assign the license to the specific users from the licenses blade. Option C is add an enterprise application from the Microsoft Entra ID portal. Option D is invite the users to a Microsoft 365 group. In this case, select option B, assign the license to the specific users from the licenses blade. To enable Microsoft Entra ID Premium features for specific users, you must assign the procured licenses to those user accounts directly via the licenses blade or via group-based licensing. A. Directory roles grant administrative permissions, not premium product features. C. Enterprise applications represent service principals for integrated applications, not user licensing. D. Inviting users to a Microsoft 365 group does not assign premium P2 licenses automatically unless group-based licensing is explicitly configured for that group. Keep this examination point in mind. Azure AD, Microsoft Entra, premium features are activated for users by assigning them a license from the licenses blade. The next item is question number 167. This question moves us into App Service Networking. Scenario. You manage an Azure App Service web app named Inventory App. The app must query a Microsoft SQL Server database hosted on the on-premises network. DNet Hybrid is already connected to the on-premises network by a working site-to-site VPN, and the web app and VNet are in the same Azure region. What should you configure on Inventory App to provide outbound access through VNet Hybrid? Review the options. Option A, VNet integration. Option B, an Azure Application Gateway. Option C, a Microsoft Entra Application Proxy. Option D, a private endpoint for inbound access to Inventory App. The best answer is option A, VNet integration. The key reason is App Service VNet integration enables outbound traffic from the app into the selected virtual network. Inventory App can then use VNet Hybrid's existing VPN route to reach the on-premises SQL server. The incorrect choices fail for the following reasons. B. Application Gateway controls inbound web traffic and does not provide outbound VNet access. C. Application Proxy publishes on-premises web applications to users. It does not connect an app service app to a database. D. A private endpoint provides private inbound access to the app and does not enable outbound connectivity. Exam tip. Use App Service VNet integration for outbound access to resources in VNets, peered VNets, and networks reachable through VPN or ExpressRoute. You have completed Part 4 of the AZ-104 Microsoft Azure Administrator Exam Practice Series. Keep building your Azure administration skills by opening the complete playlist and continuing with the remaining parts in sequence. If this session helped your preparation, like the video, subscribe to Tech with Kaushik, And enable notifications for more certification exam practice content. Share your score, doubts, or feedback in the comments. I would be happy to hear how your preparation is going. Thank you for learning with Tech with Kaushik. Keep practicing, and I will see you in the next part.